What happens when royalty meets real talk? When Meghan Markle sat down for what should have been a safe, daytime TV interview, no one expected it to spiral into live chaos. But what unfolded on Loose Women left the panel, the audience, and the internet absolutely stunned. Words were exchanged, tempers flared, security stepped in, and Meghan walked, or rather stormed off the set. Was it a media ambush or a moment of accountability? This is the full story you weren't supposed to see. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We break down every shocking celeb moment like no one else. You don't want to miss what's coming next. It was supposed to be just another lively daytime chat. The popular British talk show Loose Women had teased a very special guest all week, building anticipation across social media and tabloids. When the cameras rolled and Meghan Markle walked onto the set, the energy shifted instantly. This was not a typical segment. This was royal. This was personal. And whether you admire Meghan or question her narrative, one thing was certain: everyone was watching. Meghan looked calm, collected, and ready, smiling, waving, dressed in a soft cream blouse with her signature sleek hair tucked behind one ear. Ruth Langsford welcomed her with warmth, and the audience responded with polite applause. It all seemed normal on the surface. But behind the scenes, producers whispered into earpieces, tension hummed beneath the lights, and even the panelists seemed just a little too rehearsed. What followed in the next 30 minutes was anything but scripted. Words flew, accusations were made. In one panelist, Denise Welch, pushed Meghan into a corner she did not expect. The conversation took a sharp turn, and before anyone could stop it, everything unraveled live on air. Meghan, the Duchess, who had spent years curating her voice, was suddenly in a position she could not control. And yes, she walked off. Or maybe stormed is a better word. Either way, it was loud, it was public, and it is what everyone is talking about now. So what actually happened that day? Was it an ambush or a fair challenge? Was Meghan wrong to react the way she did, or was she pushed too far? If you are just tuning in, be sure to hit subscribe. Trust me, you will want to hear every word of what happened next. Meghan Markle walked onto the Loose Women set with a quiet confidence. She wore a soft cream blouse paired with simple tailored slacks, and her hair was styled neatly, tucked behind her ears. She smiled at the crowd, waved politely, and took her seat next to Ruth Langsford. There was no sign of nerves on her face. She looked calm, composed, and completely in control. The audience responded with applause that felt supportive, maybe even a little excited. After all, this was not just any celebrity guest. This was Meghan. Ruth welcomed her with warmth, calling it a long overdue appearance. Meghan laughed softly, said she was happy to finally be there, and thanked everyone for having her. The opening chat was light and upbeat. They talked about her charity work, her children, and her recent projects. Meghan shared a few stories about motherhood, touched on her love for working with women's organizations, and even joked about adjusting to British weather again. The panel seemed engaged. Kay Adams nodded thoughtfully. Janet Streetporter asked about her podcast, and the audience laughed and clapped at all the right moments. It felt like a friendly, open space. Nothing about the conversation felt forced. Then Ruth introduced the rest of the panel. Denise Welch joined in from across the table, wearing a bold red jacket and a sharp look in her eyes. Her smile was polite, but her energy was different. There was something pointed in the way she leaned forward, waiting for her turn to speak. Meghan noticed it. Everyone did. The tone began to shift ever so slightly. The questions started to feel less about promoting projects and more about addressing the past. Meghan kept smiling, but there was a flicker of change in her eyes. It was still calm, but something was building beneath the surface. Then came the moment that changed the entire mood. As Meghan finished talking about a women's mentorship program, Denise leaned forward. Her voice was calm, but there was weight behind her words. She said, "Meghan, you have spoken quite openly about your struggles inside the royal family, in Hollywood, and even with the media. But do you ever wonder if, in all of these situations, you might be the common denominator?" The studio went quiet. No laughter. No reaction from the audience. Just silence. Meghan paused. She blinked once, then twice. Her smile faded slightly, but she held her posture. She took a breath and replied, "I think anytime someone tells their story, people will see it how they want to. I have always tried to speak my truth with honesty and kindness. My goal has never been to blame anyone, but to share what I experienced." It was a calm answer, careful, but Denise was not finished. She followed up quickly. "You say kindness, but the way you spoke about the royal family, especially in that Oprah interview, did not feel kind to a lot of people. And then there is the constant comparison to Kate. She faces the same press pressure, yet you both seem to have walked away from it so differently. Why is that?" Again, silence. The tension in the room was hard to ignore. Even Kay and Janet shifted in their seats. Ruth looked down at her cards, avoiding eye contact. The crew behind the cameras stopped moving. Meghan stayed quiet for a beat. Longer this time, her jaw tightened just slightly. Then she said, Kate and I are different people. We have different stories, different struggles. I respect her journey, but mine is mine. It was not a dramatic outburst, it was measured. But her voice had dropped, and the warmth from earlier was gone. The energy had changed completely, and the audience felt it. You could see people holding their breath, waiting for what would happen next. Meghan sat up straighter, her tone shifting as she responded to Denise's comparison. She said, I think what you are doing right now is trying to erase my experience by comparing it to someone else's. That is not fair. Everyone processes pain differently. To suggest that I am the problem in all of this sounds a lot like victim blaming. The audience reacted. Some people gasped quietly. Others shifted in their seats. A few even nodded along. You could feel the tension getting heavier. Denise did not back down. She looked directly at Meghan and said, You have told your story in the Oprah interview. You told it again in the Netflix series. Then again in your magazine features. And now, again today. If you are speaking your truth, then why does it keep changing? Why does it always seem to center around being misunderstood? The air thickened. The room was quiet except for the low hum of cameras and someone coughing in the back. Meghan responded quickly this time. Her voice was sharper, a little firmer. Because it has to be told. Because people in power used the media to twist the truth. I am not changing my story. I am adding context. I am showing what gaslighting looks like when it happens in plain sight. Denise raised her eyebrows. So the press, the royal family, the public, everyone is gaslighting you. Meghan replied without missing a beat. I never said everyone. I said there is a pattern. And it is systemic. The media builds you up just to tear you down. They chose who to protect. I was not one of them. At this point, the audience was fully engaged. Some were clearly on Meghan's side, nodding and clapping softly. Others looked more skeptical. A few whispered to each other, eyes locked on the stage. It was no longer a friendly interview. It had turned into a live debate, and for the first time, it felt like Meghan was losing control of the narrative. Denise was not backing off. The conversation was no longer about charity or family. It was about power, image, and truth. And it was playing out in front of everyone, without a script. Denise took a deep breath, then looked straight at Meghan. What about the palace staff? The complaints? The bullying allegations? That was not the media. That came from people who worked directly with you. The mood shifted instantly. Meghan's jaw tightened. Her voice came back slower, heavier. That story was leaked. It was meant to discredit me days before my Oprah interview. You know that, and yet it keeps being dragged back into the conversation. Denise raised her hand gently, like she was trying to stay calm but firm. But Meghan, it was not just one person. Several staffers came forward. Some even said they felt humiliated, that they were pushed too hard. These were people behind the scenes, not tabloids. So is that also part of the gaslighting? Meghan leaned forward now. Her tone was different, sharp, and serious. I was working in an environment where I had zero protection, where I was isolated and emotionally drained. And now you are, using anonymous claims to paint me as someone I am not. That is misinformation. The studio was dead silent. Ruth, trying to keep the conversation steady, gently stepped in. Maybe we should pivot a little. Meghan, I know this is emotional. Maybe, Meghan cut in, still locked in. No, Ruth, let me finish. I have stayed silent while this narrative kept repeating. People love to quote reports and rumors, but they forget that I was never allowed to defend myself. And the palace, the same place that leaked those stories, never released the full investigation. Ask yourself why. There was no audience reaction. This time, just the whir of cameras and the awkward stillness of the panel. Everyone looked unsure, like they were not sure how far this was going to go. Denise nodded slowly. So you are saying the findings were buried? Meghan did not hesitate. I am saying they were never meant to see the light of day, because they would not support the version of the story some people want to believe. Janet and Kay sat frozen. Even they knew they had crossed into dangerous territory. What started as a daytime talk show had turned into a public reckoning. No script, no safe words, just live emotions unraveling in front of everyone, and the cracks were starting to show. Meghan sat still for a second. Then she stood up, not rushed, but full of purpose. You could see it in her face, the emotion, the frustration, everything boiling up at once. I have taken this kind of thing for years, she said, her voice shaking slightly. And I am tired of smiling through it. Denise looked up, calm, but firm. Meghan, sit down. This is a conversation. You were invited to speak, not to shout. That was it. Meghan's eyes locked onto her. Do not tell me to sit down. This is exactly the tone that fuels the media. Condescending, controlling, masked as reasonable, and people eat it up. Ruth looked stunned. Janet stared at the floor. Kay leaned back in her chair, clearly uncomfortable. The audience was frozen. No one knew where this was going. Denise folded her hands. You are deflecting. The questions are tough because the subject is serious. People are allowed to ask about your choices. That is not bullying. That is accountability. Meghan stepped toward the edge of the platform. You want to talk about bullying? Look at how you are speaking to me. Look at how you twist every word into some tabloid-ready headline. I came here thinking I would be treated like a human being. But instead, I walked straight into another trap. Her voice was louder now. The tension in the room was almost physical. Denise kept her voice steady. Then why do the interviews? Why the docuseries? Why keep choosing public platforms if the media is so toxic? Meghan blinked hard. Because it is the only way I get to speak for myself. And every time I try, people like you twist it into an attack. Then she turned toward the audience. You all see it. This is not a discussion. This is just a public shaming dressed up as journalism. A security staffer peeked from off stage, just barely. Someone in production was clearly getting nervous. Ruth tried once more to calm things. Let us take a breath. This is obviously a very emotional topic for everyone, but Meghan was not ready to breathe. She pointed directly at Denise. You are the bully here. You push, and when someone finally speaks up, you act like they are the problem. Denise looked at her without blinking. That is not true. You are just not used to being questioned without a script. And right there, the room snapped. Gasps from the audience. A few camera crew exchanged glances. Meghan's chest rose and fell quickly. She was still standing, still staring, and everyone could tell this moment had gone somewhere no one planned. The fire had caught, and there was no putting it out now. Ruth leaned forward, signaling to the producers off camera. Her voice tried to stay calm, but everyone could hear the strain. Maybe we should cut to a break and come back with something lighter. Meghan shook her head sharply. No, that is exactly what always happens. Something uncomfortable gets said, then it gets buried with music and makeup tips. Not this time. Kay tried to soften the moment. She leaned in and offered, maybe there is a middle ground here. Everyone is just coming from different experiences. But Meghan cut her off. That is not the issue. This is not about experiences. This is about being constantly blamed for speaking up. No matter how carefully I explain, people pretend not to hear it. Kay backed off. Her tone was gentle, but her words did not land. Janet stayed silent. Her expressions said it all. She was not used to this kind of heat on Loose Women. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her eyes darted between Denise and Meghan. Ruth tried again. We are clearly very passionate here, and it is probably best to Meghan raised her voice. Why is it always me who has to calm down? Why is it always my fault? Every time I talk about pain, someone calls it an attack. That is what gaslighting looks like. The room went quiet again. You could hear the audience holding their breath. Then Denise spoke. Her voice was low, but firm. You are not being gaslit. You are being questioned. There is a difference. And sometimes, Meghan, it seems like you would rather play the victim than admit your part in any of it. Meghan stared at her, unblinking. The air was heavy. No one knew where to go next. Not Ruth, not Kay, not anyone. Meghan stood up. Her hands moved quickly, unclipping the small mic attached to her dress. The wire slipped from her collar and dangled as she tossed it onto the seat behind her. Her eyes were red but steady. She looked at the panel, then out at the silent studio audience. Harry was right. About all of it, the way the UK media operates, the way it turns pain into entertainment. This was never a conversation. This was an ambush. The room was tense. Some audience members gasped softly. Others shifted in their chairs, unsure if they should clap, speak, or stay quiet. You could hear whispers starting to spread. Phones were already out, recording everything. Behind the scenes, producers scrambled. Stage crew appeared near the edge of the frame, whispering into headsets. Ruth leaned toward her notes, unsure of what to say next. Meghan took a few slow steps backward. She paused at the edge of the set, then turned. Denise, still seated, looked straight ahead. If asking questions destroys someone, she said, not raising her voice, then maybe it needed to be destroyed. Meghan turned back. Her face was calm now. Her voice was quiet but cut through the noise. You proved my point. And just like that, she walked off the set, past the lights, past the cameras, into the hallway where the real world waited. Back in the studio, nobody moved for several seconds. Ruth looked at the floor. Kay stared off stage. Janet still had not spoken. The show was live, but for a moment, it felt frozen. Everything had changed, and no one quite knew what came next. So, now that you have seen how it all unfolded, let us take a step back. Did Denise go too far? Was it fair for her to bring up things that Meghan clearly felt were behind her? Or was she doing what any bold journalist would do, asking the hard questions that others avoid? And what about Meghan's reaction? Was it a genuine moment of frustration from someone who has had enough of the criticism, or was it something else entirely, a public unraveling of a carefully managed narrative? Some people saw strength, others saw weakness, and many are still debating what this moment really meant. We want to know what you think. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you stand with Meghan? Do you think Denise pushed the limits, or was this simply a clash that was bound to happen? And if you are still watching at this point, then you know this is what we draw. Real and totally unscripted breakdowns of the most explosive moments in media. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button, because this is just the beginning, and we have a lot more coming your way.